You wake up tomorrow with an IQ of 600. Every equation makes sense instantly. Every hidden pattern in the world becomes obvious. And within an hour you realize something disturbing. Being smarter doesn't make you rich, it makes you dangerous to the system that was counting on you staying average. Here's the twist nobody expects. The first thing your new brain notices isn't a stock tip or a secret formula. It's how many of your daily financial habits were never based on logic at all. They were based on comfort, on repetition, on not wanting to think too hard about money. And now thinking too hard is all you can do. Start with the coffee. Small thing. Almost nothing. But your new brain doesn't see a $5 drink anymore. It sees a decision repeated 12 times a year, compounding against you in an account that could have been growing instead. Not because coffee is evil, because you never ran the numbers before. Now you can't stop running them. This is the first financial shift. Not new income, new attention. Suddenly every subscription you forgot about becomes visible. Every fee buried in fine print becomes obvious. Every contract you signed without reading becomes a puzzle you can solve in seconds. Your bank statement, which used to look like noise, now reads like a confession. But here's where it gets strange. An IQ of 600 doesn't automatically make you wealthy. In fact, decades of research suggest the opposite might be closer to true. In 2007, economist Jay Zagorski studied thousands of Americans and compared their IQ scores to their actual net worth over time. His conclusion surprised almost everyone who assumed intelligence and money moved together. Raw intelligence explained only a small fraction of the difference in wealth between people. Something else was doing most of the work. So what was it? Behavior? Discipline? The boring stuff genius brains often skip because boring stuff feels beneath them. Which brings up an uncomfortable question. If you suddenly had the sharpest mind in human history, would you actually use it to build wealth slowly? Or would you get bored the moment the plan required patience? This is the paradox waking up with IQ 600 forces you to face immediately. Intelligence can calculate the perfect investment strategy in seconds. But intelligence has never been very good at sitting still and doing nothing while compound interest does the real work. There's a name for people who tested into genius-level intelligence as children and were tracked for the rest of their lives. Psychologist Lewis Terman began studying over 1,000 exceptionally high IQ children back in 1921. He expected to find future titans of industry. Instead, decades later, most of his subjects ended up in ordinary careers, with ordinary finances, indistinguishable from their less gifted peers. Some became successful, many did not. A few struggled financially despite IQs most people would consider superhuman. Terman's own research team eventually admitted something quietly devastating. Intelligence alone doesn't predict financial outcomes, it predicts almost nothing about them. So back to your new brain. 600 IQ points humming behind your eyes, and the first hour of your genius life is spent not inventing a new asset class, but staring at your grocery receipts wondering why you never noticed the markup before. By hour 2, something shifts. You start seeing money not as numbers, but as behavior encoded into systems. Every advertisement becomes transparent. You can suddenly identify instantly which purchases are driven by actual need, and which are driven by a dopamine loop engineered by a marketing team that studied your psychology far more carefully than you ever studied your own bank account. This is where your genius brain becomes genuinely useful. Not by finding a secret formula, by removing the fog. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman spent much of his career proving that even brilliant people make irrational financial decisions when emotion overrides logic. Fear of loss, he found, hits the human brain roughly twice as hard as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. That means most people, regardless of intelligence, hold on to bad investments too long and sell good ones too early simply because losing feels unbearable and winning feels replaceable. With an IQ of 600, you don't stop feeling that fear. You just finally see it happening in real time. You watch your own hand hesitate over the sell button and understand, with perfect clarity, exactly which ancient survival instinct is sabotaging you. That's the real unlock, not prediction, awareness. By the afternoon, your genius brain starts running longer simulations, career paths, business models, tax structures most people never bother to understand. You could, in theory, reverse engineer any industry within days. Patents, loopholes, arbitrage opportunities hiding in plain sight because nobody else had the patience to read 400 pages of regulatory text before lunch. But here's the catch almost nobody mentions in the genius fantasy. Money doesn't just require intelligence, it requires trust from other humans who are, by comparison, painfully average. And average humans tend to be suspicious of things they can't understand. Show a room full of investors a strategy so complex only a 600 IQ mind can grasp it, and most of them won't fund it. Not because it's wrong, because it's unreadable to them. Genius without translation is just noise to the rest of the market. So your financial future doesn't hinge only on how brilliant your ideas are. It hinges on whether you can compress genius into language an ordinary investor, an ordinary bank, an ordinary customer can actually trust. This single limitation has quietly ended more genius-level financial plans than any market crash ever has. Think about history for a second, because history has already run a version of this experiment. Not with an IQ of 600, but with something close. Every era has produced a handful of minds so far ahead of their time that ordinary institutions didn't know what to do with them. Brilliant inventors who died broke because they held the patent but not the negotiating leverage. Mathematical prodigies who could price an entire market in their heads, but couldn't convince a single bank to take them seriously before the age of 30. Intelligence built the idea. It rarely built the bank account on its own. Now flip to the modern mirror. Right now, somewhere, an algorithm with something approaching superhuman calculation speed is already pricing assets faster than any human trader ever could. High-frequency trading systems process information in microseconds, spotting patterns no unaided human brain could ever catch in time. In a sense, humanity has already built its own 600 IQ financial mind. And what did that mind do with its power? It didn't eliminate financial suffering. It mostly made markets faster, more efficient, and slightly more exhausting for everyone still thinking at human speed. Which raises the real question your new brain can't ignore. If raw computational power already exists at scale and hasn't solved inequality, hasn't ended financial confusion, hasn't made money make sense to the average person, then maybe the missing ingredient was never intelligence at all. Maybe it was distribution. Who gets access to the calculation and who gets left holding the fees? Your 600 IQ brain understands this instantly, and it's almost funny. All that raw processing power and the actual bottleneck was never your mind. It was everyone else's willingness to listen to it. So you start testing something smaller. Not a hedge fund, not a patent, a conversation. You explain in plain language, stripped of every unnecessary syllable, why a coworker's credit card debt is quietly costing them thousands more than they realize. You watch their eyes change. Not because the math was hard, because nobody had ever slowed down long enough to say it out loud to them. That's the moment your genius brain finally earns its keep. Not by outsmarting the market, by translating what was always calculable into something an ordinary human could finally act on. By evening, your simulations turn inward. You start modeling your own psychology the way you'd model a stock. What do you actually want? Not what you're told to want. Not the house, the car, the number in the account that other people admire. What outcome stripped of every social signal would make the rest of your life feel genuinely worth living? This is the part your old brain never had time to ask, because your old brain was busy paying bills, chasing promotions, and scrolling past financial advice it didn't fully understand. Your new brain has nothing but time, because thinking, for you now, costs almost nothing. And that reveals the final irony. The thing genius-level intelligence is best at isn't making more money. It's exposing how little money was ever really about intelligence in the first place. Every hidden fee you missed for years wasn't hidden because you were unintelligent. It was hidden because the entire system was built to profit from people too busy living their lives to slow down and calculate. An IQ of 600 doesn't defeat that system by outthinking it. It defeats it simply by finally having the time and clarity to look directly at what was always there. Consider how strange that actually is. Somewhere on your bookshelf or buried in an app you forgot to delete, there was already enough information to change your entire financial trajectory. The compound interest calculator. The retirement account you never opened. The high-yield savings account paying almost nothing while a better one sat one search away. None of it required genius. All of it required 5 uninterrupted minutes you never quite found. That's the part that should unsettle you most, not comfort you. Because it means the gap between where your finances are today and where they could be was never really an intelligence gap. It was a friction gap. A gap made of tiny delays, tiny distractions, tiny moments where thinking felt slightly more expensive than not thinking. Your 600 IQ brain simply removed the friction. It didn't remove the information. The information was always sitting there, waiting, which means the real secret was never locked behind genius-level intelligence at all. It was locked behind attention. The same attention any ordinary mind could apply. One receipt, one contract, one subscription at a time, if it only slowed down long enough to actually look. You didn't need 600 IQ points to see the truth about your finances. You just needed to stop being too busy to notice it was there all along.